Welcome, everyone, to the Asian Voices Radio Podcast, where you'll find real Asian American conversations about all the topics, including things you were too afraid to ask your Asian parents. I am Hula Ramos, your host, and I'm joined today by Linda Schwartz. How you doing, Linda?
I'm fantastic. How are you?
I'm doing really, really good. I'm so excited because this is our very first podcast that we are going to be presenting of Asian Voices Radio.
Yes.
And we'll talk about ourselves in just a few minutes. But first, I want to tell you a little bit about this podcast. Now, Asian Voices Radio is formatted as a weekly 30-minute podcast series for everybody. It's hosted by myself, or with myself, along with various co-hosts. And we're going to provide a stronger voice in the growing podcast media space, representing our underserved Asian and Pacific American communities. Now, what does that all mean? We're going to basically talk about things you probably didn't want to talk about with your parents, and that's kind of what this podcast is about, so to speak. But so it's about myself, or it's not about myself. It's hosted by myself. What am I even saying? It's hosted from myself. I'm Hula. If you don't know who I am, I was in the radio business for over 19 years here in San Diego. Started on a little radio station called Channel 933, which is a top 40 radio station here in San Diego. And worked my way just sharing my life stories with people and connecting and, just really being honest with them about how my life was, going. And did it for 19 years. Unfortunately, last year, I got the boot, as it seems to be during this whole pandemic, everybody getting laid off and all that kind of good stuff. But it's okay, because I do have a podcast of my own called Life with Hula. And I continue sharing my life stories about myself and about my children and about my wife and just everything about my life. So that's pretty much me in a nutshell. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Linda.
Oh, this is like such an open-ended question. Where do I start? Anything
You were
specific?
born. Well, I know you are the host of the wildly popular She Shed comedy podcast, correct?
Oh, you are just so sweet. Thank you. Yes, I am. And She Shed Comedy is a podcast that is dedicated to empowering women who are pursuing a career in comedy, whether that's stand-up, improv, sketch, writing, whatever it is that women want to do in comedy. It's dedicated to helping them take that route.
What made you decide to create this podcast? Are you yourself a comedian?
Yes, I'm a stand-up comedian. I've been pursuing that for quite some time. And, I took a long break. And then when I decided to come back into the game, I was looking for something like this as a resource to really help me get jump started and keep me motivated and stay empowered and really want to tackle it, because it's such a male dominated industry that I was like, well, there's nothing really out there, so let me just go ahead and start my own thing.
Right. No, that's awesome. To be honest with you, in the radio industry, I got to meet a lot of comedians and, through the course of my career. And yeah, you're right. You had amazing, comedians when I first started in radio back in 2000. It was mostly male, dominated. And then as we, got into more of, 2015, 2016, 2017, you have this like surge of female comedians, like Ali Wong.
Yeah, of
is
course.
an amazing
Yes.
comedian. Vicky Barbalak.
I
Did I
love
say her last?
Vicky.
She's amazing. We got introduced to her in America's Got Talent, and she's from
Yes.
San Diego.
I interviewed her on my show.
How is she?
She is fantastic. I believe that she's on a little break, but I think she's actually doing a little what do you call those charity shows? She's doing a charity show soon. So I know that she's trekking. I know she's trekking. She's a survivor. So I have no doubt she's doing all right.
Well, yeah, everybody's kind of had to change things around, gears around because of the pandemic. Obviously with comedy, the first thing, because I did work, like I said, in radio, and I also worked at a art center, which presented shows. And the first thing out the gate that seemed to be canceled were all these entertainment, things, including comedy. So, through the beginning of last year, I felt like, what were comedians really doing? Like you couldn't really do anything, right?
No, we couldn't. Yeah, we couldn't even go out. We couldn't. For the first 6 months, it seemed like we were just sitting at home. Well, I also had just had a baby, so
Oh,
I became a stay-at-home mom. But it became more of a directive, like, "Hey, stay at home, mom." You know
right,
what I'm saying?
right.
Um, so, we all just kind of stayed at home and we were just kind of waiting and waiting and waiting. And because I was still a new mom, I was like, okay, what can I do to keep this dream alive inside of myself? And, I talked to my friends a lot about comedy, but that wasn't really helping because, we couldn't really get out there and do it. And I was on hiatus anyway for a little while because I was pregnant and my feet were enormous and I couldn't stand up. So, it's y- anyway. So I started taking some classes and that really helped. But, there were just so many mixed messages about being what was open, what could open, what we could do, what we couldn't do. And I think at one point, Mike Vin, who you mentioned earlier,
Mhm.
posted something about, hey, is there anybody with a backyard who would be willing to have a show in their backyard? And I was like, yes, me. And, nothing ever came out of that because I think that there was some other logistical things that were in the way. But at any rate, I think everybody in the comedy world and in the service industry has just been itching and waiting and wanting to go back to work. And I know that my friends who are in comedy have been, well, number one, if they don't have a good paying job, they're definitely having a really hard time. And those of us who aren't having a hard time, it's like, okay, we're just kind of waiting to get back. But in the
Right.
meantime, I've been working on some new material. I've talked to my mom a lot. She's the source of my material. So that has been really going really well. But um, yeah, so that's kind of where we are, I
Well,
think.
speaking of your mom, because obviously we are a podcast, and for those that don't know, I am Filipino American, so my background is Filipino. And so, what about you? What is Linda Schwartz? What would you
So
identify as?
well, I identify as Linda Schwartz, but but I'm Lao American, and my parents are from Laos. They immigrated from Laos in 1979, and
Mm.
I was born in Savannah, Georgia, in 1982. So I just turned 39 last week.
Happy birthday, belated
Thank
birthday!
you, thank you, thank you.
You don't look a day over 25 like all
Ah,
Asians.
thank you, thank you. That's, also, luckily due to me doing a lot of face yoga too, so
Oh, there's that. There's face
Mhm.
yoga. That's a thing. That
Yes, it is definitely a thing, and it is wonderful. I highly recommend everybody look into it.
But as we're like actually, presenting this podcast, we're currently celebrating the Lunar New Year for those that celebrate the Lunar New Year, which is mostly commonly associated with the Chinese New Year or Spring Festival. Now, is that something that you celebrate?
No,
Oh,
I do not celebrate. So coming up as a Lao person in Savannah, Georgia in the 80s,
uh
I
huh.
did not see very many people like myself. As a matter of fact, we lived in a small housing project where there were a lot of like country ass white people and so I always felt out of place. I went to school with a bunch of black kids and a bunch of white kids, and there were only really like 5 Lao families, and we were different age ranges, so we went to different schools, and at my particular school, I was maybe 1 in 5 Asian kids at the whole school. So
Wow.
yeah, so I was really conflicted. I grew up with a very non-traditional Lao family, I guess you could say. We were the family that other parents didn't want their kids to play with because my dad was an alcoholic, my parents were
Wow.
divorced,
Mm.
my brothers were the kids who were like out after midnight doing things they shouldn't be doing. And
Ah.
so, I mean, I remember just growing up in Savannah, Georgia, you know, this Asian kid who I was having an identity crisis at
Uh-huh.
like 5 years old. I was like, what am I doing here? Who am I? Why don't I look like everybody else? Why don't I eat like everybody else? And so
Ah.
we ate a lot of weird food. And I at one point I just remember refusing to eat Lao food from for any home cooked meals. I'm like, this is not what I want to eat. I don't belong in this family. I don't think that I need to be here. So, and I kind of almost ended up on the wrong side of the street. But I think that there were some inner things that kind of led me back to um, the light.
That's fascinating. You bring that up because I grew up here in San Diego most of my life. My dad was in the military. And so luckily for us, I mean, a lot of people who are kids growing up in the military, you tend to move a lot. But like I said, luckily for me, we didn't move very much. But I can relate in the sense that I would, be excited to have a lunch pail and bring my lunch. But then when I would open my lunch, I literally would have chicken adobo with
Yeah.
rice. I would have spam sandwiches. And kids are like, why am I trading my peanut butter and jelly sandwich with this kid who's got like some stinky meat that's canned? Like,
Yeah.
what is that about? And I honestly grew up embarrassed being
Yes.
Filipino and be embarrassed being Asian. And I would kind of assimilate, like when people are like, what, are you Mexican? And I'm like, yeah, okay, yeah, sure, whatever you think. I honestly would say, yeah, sure, whatever. I would
Yeah.
never really immediately would say Filipino. And I grew up in San Diego's considered a pretty big city compared to Savannah, Georgia.
Yeah.
So I definitely can relate with the situation that you went through. And I mean, when did you eventually, I guess, did you ever really embrace your, Laotian culture?
Not when I was younger. I like you, I grew up so ashamed of being Lao. Like it took me just in the last, let's say, 5 years to even admit to myself and even say that I am or I identify as Lao American.
Uh-huh.
And to answer your initial question, no, I don't celebrate Lunar New Year because I wasn't raised in a family that had these kinds of celebrations.
Right.
We don't have these traditions well, I mean, my dad would always go to parties, but they weren't the they weren't the big Lunar New Year or Lao New Year type parties. It was always like these house parties where they played cards and literally would play cards all weekend long and would just leave the kids up to, do whatever they wanted to do. But at any rate, yeah, I was ashamed of being Lao. I had a lot of um, just identity issues when I was
Hmm.
growing up. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know where I stood. On things. It was just like where I didn't know a lot of my family history. I and then my dad passed away, so that part of me is completely gone. I can't go back and ask him where he came from or what his life was like in Laos. And that's kind of why my mom and I were estranged for many, many years. I didn't talk to her for a period of like 10 or 15 years.
Wow.
And then as I got older, I realized that I really needed to make amends with my mom because she's the only link to my past and my history.
Right.
So we've been getting along much better. I talk to her a lot now.
Oh,
We've
good.
made amends, but you know, growing up, I just didn't have the capacity to think about anything else except how shitty my life was.
Right, right. I mean,
You know?
when did you eventually get to leave Savannah, Georgia?
Well, my parents were divorced when I was 2.5. So I was going back and forth between the two of them and between other family members in different states and different cities.
Wow.
I mean, it felt like I was in a military family because I was moving all the time. But I came back to California permanently when I was 14 in 1996.
Oh, wow.
Hmm.
Okay. Okay.
So, yeah, so I've been here since then.
So then, okay, we're going to fast forward real quick. Are you married?
I'm married, I have a kid. My life is fantastic. I love my life. It's wonderful. I've done a lot of healing work.
Now, question, because I did introduce you as Linda Schwartz. Schwartz doesn't sound very typically Laotian to
No.
me.
Mm-mm.
Did you marry a Laotian person? A Lao person?
Clearly not. I married somebody who I could take the last name and not have anybody ask me how to spell it or how to pronounce it because so my maiden name is Parathikoun, spelled Parathikoune. That's 13 letters. That's half of the English alphabet. And I seriously, when we got married, I was like, oh my gosh, it was such a burden, going
Right.
through life with this last name. I'm like, I have to pronounce it every single time. I have to spell it slowly every single time I'm on the phone with somebody. And it's like I just want an easy name. I just want an easy name. So Schwartz is what I got.
So that was your determination, your determiner of like who you would date. Oh, what's your last name?
Exactly.
Schwartz? Okay, good. Bing. We're on the right track. Check mark
Smith?
one. We're good.
Perfect.
Jones? Okay, good. Good to hear. Yes. That's funny.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, see, I mean, like I said, I kind of understand where you're coming from because, like I said, I wasn't. I grew up. I'm a lot older than you. I mean, I'm Asian, but Asians don't raisin, so a lot of people don't really know how old I am. But I will be a magnificent 47 this year.
Ooh.
Yes.
Yeah. You
See,
look good, Hula.
Hey, it's that face
I
yoga.
know.
No, that face yoga. No, but yeah, I was like you, like I said, I grew up not really, mentioning I was Filipino. I ended up I went to college for a little while. And yes, before the jokes even start, I was going to be in the medical field. Was going to school to be in the medical field. And then I realized, wait, these are my parents' dreams, not my dreams. So
Yes.
I literally up and left my freshman year and I took a trip and I decided, I call it my Forrest Gump trip. And I traveled to places that are very opposite of San Diego. So you found me in Idaho,
Mm.
found me in Montana,
Mhm.
Colorado. I ended up living in Utah, and
Oh.
literally these people were like, now, what kind of Asian are you, or like, are you like, and I'm like, wait, what?
Yes.
A lot of people are like, oh, so you're Native American? Which tribe do you belong to? And I'm like, no. Not Native American either. But thanks for that. But I wouldn't even mention like what I was to them either. And this was like my 20s. So, I mean, it took me a while to really identify being Filipino. I was not like my brothers who were like fit the stereotypical Filipino ways of going to, singing and dancing and
Yes.
playing guitar, going
nursing
to
school.
yeah, going to college. My brother's in pharmaceutical sales. My other one is for sure in sales of some sort. But yeah, no, I did the creative thing, and that was my route to life. But yeah, no, I even married outside of the race. I didn't marry Filipino. I married a Hispanic woman. My
Ooh.
kids are beautiful Mexipino kids.
I love it.
And yeah, no, it's great. And to this day, I embrace my Filipino-ness, if that's even a word. But I do make sure I instill like the culture with my kids because they are half Filipino. And it's funny because just recently I went to a party and my parents for sure were like, oh, make sure there's a Filipino term of endearment for older siblings. And it's to call your older brother, it's kuya, and to
Kuya,
call
yeah.
your older sister ate. My parents were strong, like telling my kids, okay, make sure you say ate, make sure you say kuya, like to all the cousins and stuff. And I'm like, Mom, Dad, it's okay if they don't say it, if they don't know, like that's cool. And it was weird to see that my parents were hardcore, like, okay, you're Filipino. Like,
Yeah.
here's what you need to be doing. You need to eat rice. You need to have top ramen. Like, this is your thing. And
Yeah.
so it's interesting. I don't know obviously you're back with your family. Is that a thing for you to
Oh,
really
my mom doesn't tell
instill?
me what to do ever. I love
Oh,
it.
okay.
That's the nature of our relationship now because it's like she's never really we've never had that kind of endearing well, let me take a step back and say we've never really had a healthy relationship. So
Okay.
this is actually the first time that we've had a healthy relationship. So it's I've had to set a lot of boundaries in the healing process of our relationship. So now, she doesn't ever tell me what to do anymore. Like when I was younger, one of the reasons, so I left home when I was 16.
Oh,
I
wow.
was out living an independent life, paying my own bills, paying my own rent when I was 16 years old. And it was because my mom was when I was living with her, she was so strict, and we didn't have that foundation of her being in my life to say, for her to tell me what to do and for me to listen. Right. So
Right.
I was like, okay, well, who are you to tell me what to do? This is my life. You've never been there for me. So I am going to just go ahead and take a really, really big risk and leave. So I did, and I made it just fine. But, I didn't have that kind of relationship with her to begin with. So it was just, so now it's like, when we have conversations, they're really nice conversations of us just getting to know each other again, and
Oh, good.
really, you were talking a little bit about being embracing your Filipino-ness, and I'm kind of in the same boat with you in terms of me really embracing the Lao culture now.
Okay.
I mean, I don't day to day, I'm not trying to teach my kid how to be Lao or anything like that, because number one, I don't have that foundation for myself,
Right.
because I'm fully assimilated. I am fully assimilated. I consider I don't even make Lao food, but I'm learning. I'm in the process of learning how to be more Lao and embracing my culture more, and really coming to know what it is that my culture is about, and learning my history as a Lao American, how my mom got here, what that was like for her, what the journey was like for her, and how she became who she is in America today. And that's been a very interesting journey and conversation between us, and it's just been such a enlightening kind of opportunity, because I just have so much more compassion and so much more love and so much more respect for my mom than I ever have before. And, when you're growing up and you don't understand what's going on, why your life is the way that it is, you don't get perspective until you're older and you start digging for answers. And I've always been on this journey of digging for answers and seeking out more and learning. And it's come full circle in that now that I've come to terms about who I am as a person, as a human being, as a woman, as a mother, as a wife. Now I can come to terms with who I am as a daughter, to this Lao woman who came here in the throes of a war.
Right. No, that's not, I think that's awesome. I think that's great. I feel like a lot of kids, or teens, or, young adults that are, have family from wherever, whether Asian or not, that their parents are, first, from the original OG country, I guess. And then, them being first generation born American. It's interesting to, I think everybody needs their own type of self-discovery situation
For
to figure
sure.
themselves out and figure out their culture and figure out how they want to represent themselves and represent their culture.
Well, let me ask you this.
Okay.
So now that you've embraced being Filipino, what's your favorite thing about being Filipino?
I mean, I can say these typical answers, the food, of course, because when we got married, my mom gave my wife and I a recipe book,
Oh.
which I didn't know like existed or anything. And so I forced myself to make chicken adobo,
Mm.
Filipino lumpia, wrap it the right way. It made me, that was kind of cool. Like that kind of started the journey. What about you?
Oh, my favorite thing about being Lao is also the food. Like I've kind of been obsessed with the food, although I have this allergy to MSG. So
Oh,
and Lao food is like chock full of that crap. So I just have to I'm figuring out ways to adapt recipes, but that's been really, really fun for me, because the flavors in Lao food are just so robust and so good, and funky. When you're talking about like taken stinky food to school. Like Lao food is
Right.
like the funkiest. It's like the stinkiest of all these Asian food, So, um,
That's funny.
yeah, that's like my least favorite thing about it, but it's also like the most. I'm really coming to terms with it. My cousin sent me a bottle of like fermented fish sauce, which in Lao is called padak,
Uh-huh.
and it is like literally hidden somewhere in the back of my cupboard because I'm afraid to open it in front of my husband. I'm like waiting for him to go on a trip so that I can open it and make something. But yeah, I'm the same. I really love the Lao food, and
I think we get, at the end of the day, if we can't agree on anything, we can agree on food, I
that's
think.
right. That's right.
We all can agree on food. But God, I feel like I can talk to you more. And I know obviously as we continue these podcasts, you will be jumping in
Oh
and,
yes.
being a co-host with us. So I want to thank you so much for being our guest today for the very first episode. I appreciate you joining us
Oh,
and to
thanks
learn
for
more
having me.
of course, and to learn more about you and the She Shed comedy, where can people find you?
Well, people can check out my website at sheshedcomedy.com. And I am officially off of social media. So you won't be able to find me anywhere, but you still can go to my website,
Oh, okay.
sheshedcomedy.com. I know. I know. I'm a rebel. What do you say?
You are a rebel. I feel like I need to take the cleanse as well. I think it's one of those things. But for those of you listening, thank you so much for tuning in. If you have any suggestions for future podcasts or future topics, we'd absolutely love to hear from you. You can reach us at Asian Voices Radio at Podbean. That's where you can also subscribe to the podcast and find it at asianvoicesradio.com. Again, asianvoicesradio.com. And you can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. But until next week, I am Hula Ramos on behalf of my co-host, Linda Schwartz. Thank you so much for listening. And please join us next week for another exciting and thought-provoking Asian Voices radio show. Take care till then. We'll see ya.